I mentioned NATO and what they're doing in Ukraine. I mean, NATO's newest member of Hungary just said that they're not on board with NATO's 5-year war plan for Ukraine. Notice I said 5-year war plan. This war has been going on since 2021. This is 3 years ago. And they want 5 more years of it. NATO can stop this war with Russia. Russia has said over and over again that they're open to terms to come to peace in Ukraine. And we've nipped in the bud any chance of that. There was a peace agreement in place, and the United States sends Boris Johnson over to end it. There's many chances, and there's still a chance. It's going away, but there's still a chance to have peace in Ukraine. But when you have NATO wanting 5 more years of this, they have a fund of 100 billion euros to keep Ukraine fighting for 5 years. Ukraine's not even a part of NATO, may I add. And now you have NATO members against NATO's agenda in Ukraine. That's crazy. 5 more years of this. It's been a stalemate. I mean, there was about a year, maybe less, of movement on the battle lines. But I would say like the past year and a half to 2 years has been a stalemate. And God forbid anybody say that, especially in the U.S. government, and tell the truth. But it has been. It's been a stalemate in Ukraine for quite some time now. The war has been over. Ukraine's front line is weak as all get out. They're running out of men. They're running out of generations of men to choose from to fight. There's no end in sight. And countries who are even in NATO are starting to see how ridiculous this is. That they want a country outside of NATO fighting for 5 more years, and we're going to send 100 billion euros to make sure that happens. That is just utterly ludicrous and crazy. This confirms that there's no hope for any peace deal in Ukraine with NATO acting as recklessly as they are. They claim they don't want a direct conflict with Russia, but they'll send other countries through the meat grinder who aren't even in NATO to be our proxy for to fight Russia. We hate Russia so much, and we're not stupid enough to fight with our own men, but we are stupid enough to support Ukraine as long as we have. And when I say we in this scenario, I say the United States and NATO, because the United States is pretty much NATO. They have the little sidekicks in Europe, but without the United States, NATO would be nothing. They claim they don't want a direct conflict with Russia, but we're going to have Ukraine be our proxy. And then claim that we care about Ukraine. Oh, Ukraine, they're putting up such a good fight against that evil Russia. This is a fight for democracy, which is funny to start with. I talked about this before. Claiming Ukraine as a beacon of democracy is crazy. I mean, they're probably one of the most corrupt democracies on the face of the earth. I mean, I wouldn't even call them a democracy. They're an oligarchy is what they are. But to say that you hate Russia so much that I'm going to send a proxy and put all those people through the meat grinder and then say that I care for them as a country. No, you don't. You just hate Russia. You're using Ukraine as a perfect way to fight Russia. They knew what was going to happen if, you have Kamala Harris going publicly saying that Ukraine will be a part of NATO. NATO knew what they were doing. NATO knew what was going to happen when they made a push for Ukraine to be in NATO. They knew Russia was going to invade Ukraine. They're not stupid. They knew that this war was going to happen, and yet they still went forward with it because they're bloodthirsty and want a war with Russia. Because you have the military contractors in the U.S. who everybody in NATO has to use their weapons. They're getting filthy rich off of this war in Ukraine. And a fight with Russia, that just fills their pockets with money. And even if it didn't happen, if Russia didn't invade Ukraine, if Ukraine became part of NATO, that's just another country a part of NATO to abide by the weapons criteria, get them rich anyways, and now you got a reason to put weapons and nukes right on Russia's border. So they knew what they were doing when they were doing this. NATO provoked the war. I'm not saying that Russia should have invaded Ukraine. I'm not saying Russia's reasoning behind it and Putin's reasoning behind it, claiming that Ukraine is theirs to start with. Obviously, that's ludicrous and crazy. But that's like saying, a good analogy to describe this war in Ukraine is, say, somebody loads a pistol or a gun or whatever, it's loaded, puts it up to somebody, walks forward, puts the gun against their head, pulls the trigger back, and then when that person responds, It's like, oh, well, this war wouldn't have started if you wouldn't have responded. We put that gun to Russia's head by putting more and more countries in NATO, expanding NATO east towards Russia, and then the last country to have NATO right on Russia's border, Russia's going to respond. So, like I said, is Russia and Putin's reasoning for the war legitimate, and does it make sense? No. But we started the war. We put that gun against Russia's head by expanding east, and the last country to put it on the border, put NATO on the border of Russia, we knew Russia was going to respond. We provoked that war. NATO provoked that war with Russia, and now we're claiming that Russia started because they invaded. Anybody with common sense that knows the full history and knows the full picture knows that this war started because of NATO. Russia tried to join NATO in 2000. The whole point of NATO is to protect Europe from Russia. Russia tries to join NATO. There's no need for NATO anymore. So why are we expanding eastward and trying to get the country right on Russia's border to be a part of NATO? Are they stupid? They're not stupid. They knew what was going to happen. They hate Russia so much, they're okay sending Ukraine through the meat grinder for 5 more years. 5 more years of this is what they want. There's no end in sight. There's no peace deal in sight to end this war. And you have countries like Hungary who are now a part of NATO. They joined NATO like a couple months ago, and they're even saying how ridiculous this is. So the United States is going to find a way to keep NATO doing this. It doesn't matter if everybody in NATO disagrees, slowly comes to their senses. They're going to keep doing it. They're going to find a way to keep doing it because, like I said, the NATO is not anything without the United States. So this is the United States' war. It's just as much as it's NATO's war. I would say more than it is NATO's war because the United States wants a Cold War with Russia again. You could say that's ludicrous, but look at our actions. We're not inviting Russia to be an ally after the Cold War. When Russia came to the table, Putin in his interview with Tucker Carlson said that he expressed how deeply offended and upset he was that Russia wasn't embraced after the USSR. And, you can say that there were no legitimate pushes from Russia to do that when they tried to join NATO, okay? They tried to join the exact organization you built to protect Europe from Russia. And then you have Russia try to join NATO. Maybe that's a sign that, look, this fight's over. We can accept Russia as an ally now. But no, our leaders are stupid and don't look ahead to see eventually if we make Russia an enemy, eventually they're going to build back up to be a global superpower. If you didn't think that, you're stupid. They think that Russia doesn't have resources or, that's like during the Cold War that they claim that Russia didn't have petroleum or resources to build a nuke. It's propaganda is what it is. But if we were smart, we would have realized that Russia eventually, they're the largest landmass in the world. Eventually, they're going to get to a point where they're a global superpower. And if we start to make them an ally instead of an enemy after the Cold War, when the USSR collapsed, maybe we wouldn't be in this position. But we've continued to alienate ourselves from them and isolate ourselves from them along with China. And now we're between a rock and a hard place. And we're going to lose that battle. And NATO is not letting this war end in Ukraine to where we can come to peace terms with Russia eventually and put an end to all this nonsense. This should have been over a long time ago if we didn't nip in the bud that peace deal using Boris Johnson of all people, who's not even in power anymore. NATO is continuing to push this war. There's no end in sight for this war. Unfortunately, any hopes that you probably had or maybe had of this war coming to an end and NATO coming to their senses, well, NATO's got to plan for 5 more years of this. They're willing to push this as long as possible. 5 more years. So that's not a good sign at all. There's just nothing but bad signs coming from the West side in this war in Ukraine. And I wouldn't bet on any peace deal ever from our side. Russia's already come to the table, and, especially with Putin's rhetoric this week, maybe those opportunities for peace are slim to none and are getting slimmer. It's stupidity, and we have nobody to blame but ourselves. Nobody to blame but NATO and the United States. So maybe more countries like Hungary in NATO that are opposed to this will speak up. I don't know how much it will do. Like I said, the United States will find a way to keep this going. But at least you got countries like Hungary and NATO saying how ridiculous this is. Man, at least outside of NATO, they aren't the only ones who think this is crazy. We'll see. Maybe they'll take back Hungary's admission into NATO. They'll take that away.